super corny, but I feel like what we're trying to do together, so many of the people in my community, is to just like make it safer to emanate the vibration of love. And I feel like creativity to me is really just existing with the remembrance that you deserve to have life force flowing through you. And it is so human to want to see other people's life force flowing through them too. Other people's creativity is like food for our soul. And when you have this spiritual, creative, intellectual sort of curiosity to just experiment with the idea, like maybe my soul's not from here, maybe it is harder for me, you can go, okay, logically, somehow I'm here by some force of nature or the universe, accepting that and going, well, we already bought tickets to the amusement park, so what ride do you want to go on? Because we're here today.
Xenia, welcome to the Way of the Heart.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am like beyond excited. I am so happy. I am honored that you are sharing your energy, your time with me and with everyone listening. I am mainly really excited and grateful that those that have been tuning into this podcast are going to have the opportunity to listen to you and to you share your wisdom and your gifts through the work that you're doing and just everything. I mean, I have so many things to say about you that are good, that make my heart happy, that yeah, I will be sharing more throughout the podcast because you have a very special place in my heart.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful that life brought us together. And in some interesting ways, I feel like this is just the beginning. So yeah, thank you.
There are so many places that we could go in this conversation. And before we start going there, going deep into all of the topics that we like, um, I would love to start by learning a little bit more about you. If you feel comfortable sharing about, how it was to grow up, where you grew up, where did you grow up? How was your childhood? Anything that comes to mind that you think has shaped who you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I'm pretty much an open book, and I really love starting with these kinds of questions because I feel like so much comes from early life. And I joke all the time that I grew up at the mall in the suburbs of Philadelphia because I was born in '83. So it was very much during mall culture. And I grew up in a place that was super suburban. I was one of a handful of kids in a school of like 2,000 graduating class in my high school who was not white. So in a place where I was considered very different, and I'm a first generation immigrant. I was born in the Philippines and came here when I was around 2 years old. So, it's really interesting, this question, because I never felt any sense of being different in terms of like being from a different place because I was so integrated into my community. But I felt different more because of how I thought and how I was always questioning things and always wanting to know more and more about things that were hard to find or kind of on the fringe of culture. And in my sort of middle school years, what that looked like was trying to find the weirdest music on the college radio station, or trying to find interesting records at the record store, or kids who were making their own music, or just kind of really curious about what it was like to be really like a weirdo, like kids who were exploring that as like on purpose, the kids with like the green dyed hair and the kids who really wanted to express individuality. And before the internet, that was kind of an interesting project in the suburbs to be so curious about how to be different when all you have access to is like literally the same books, the same stores, the same clothes, like everything, the same TV shows, everything the same. And so growing up in what I would consider one of the most like average, normal environments in America during sort of the height and heyday of capitalism really actually taught me how to just play around with whatever's in front of me, how to adapt and how to blend in and how to like both blend in and stand out at the same time, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. I feel like I also had the pleasure of going to a gigantic school in the suburbs. So if you had an interest, you could find someone with that interest. If you had a sort of disposition to be more quiet or to be more extroverted, you could find kids that were definitely like that. And so even though it was really not diverse in some ways, it was just sort of energetically diverse because of the sheer number of people that were in the school. So I grew up with a lot of stability compared to a lot of people. Both my parents left the only environment they knew. My mom's sister had to pretend to be her to get a job because her accent was so thick. That's how difficult it was for my mom to acclimate to the States. So yeah, I always had this insider-outsider dichotomy in my life. And I think that really informs like everything I do now. I've always felt both really inside and outside of things at the same time. Yeah.
That is very interesting. I had never thought about simply just being around so many people. Like in school, for example, I tend to think because of, I don't know, the way that I grew up and like how we see things are kind of like going towards today when it comes to school system and teaching in general, that we it almost seems like it's easier to have smaller groups because then you can really pay attention to every single person, which of course that is part of it. It's true, right? There's a degree of truth in that. But also this idea that just being in like such a big school can provide that sense of stability as well, because what you said, just because of the number of people, chances or the probability of finding someone that resonated with your essence was pretty high. That's very interesting.
Yeah, totally. And like, just to sort of answer the question in a little bit of a more like direct or traditional way, I was also one of three kids, three daughters, and I'm the eldest. So when you think about that, whenever I had something to do, I didn't have anyone to ask. So the first dance I went to, or even the first day of school, my mom would be like, I think this is what you wear. When you go to school, let me know if people laugh at you or if anyone says anything about you, because I'm not sure if this is okay, how I'm dressing you. And so I was both like very accepted in my school because there was so many people, and because I did really well. I was like a sort of classic textbook nerd, but I was also like really well liked. I was the president of like half the clubs in the high school. I ran for class president. I had a phase where I was, like a junior cheerleader. I had a phase where, like I was saying before, I was trying to just be like the weirdest person in the school, where I literally would wear my grandmother's pajamas and oven mitts as gloves and was like, I wonder what will happen if I do this. So it went from like really trying to teach myself how to fit in because my parents needed me to do that, so that they could feel like she's okay, we're doing a good job. We didn't send her to school in a way where people are going to like make fun of her or other her. And then after being like deeply accepted by the people in school and learning like, I know how to play this game, like I know how to fit in, being like, well, how do I go to the opposite extreme and see how like sort of how can I like make a wave in this school? How can I introduce something strange or different? There was one year that I encouraged all the kids in my 7th grade class and went to a public school, so we didn't have a uniform, but I had this like vest and I was like, let's all wear it on picture day because it will be really funny. And like, I would just try to like make strange things happen, because in the back of my head, it was like the first part of school was acclimating to the environment. And then the second part was like, what can I create here? How can I change the things and how they're happening here in like a playful and fun and curious way? And as you know, that's kind of the line that I walk as someone who wants to be inside, but also outside. Inside enough to speak the language of anyone I meet, to relate to anyone I meet, to just understand what it's like to be human on the most basic universal level, no matter who I'm talking to, but not so much that I forget all the potential or possibility that's not even manifest yet in the world as we know it. And so I do feel like being a first generation immigrant, I really loved and enjoyed having that privilege, actually. Yeah.
I love that, and I love to hear that that is what you were doing even as a small human, because being able to experience and witness your work, that's ultimately what you're still doing. And not only that, what you're giving people permission to do. I'm even getting emotional because I've I've told you this, like I feel like you, and specifically, I'm sure we're going to be talking about it, Imaginal Temple, which is the container that I was able to be part of, that you facilitated. It felt like what my inner child needed, just like that permission to explore, to see life from like this place of exploration. And it's like a laboratory, and you're kind of like playing with things, and you're curious about things, and like, what does it work? What doesn't, what's not working? What's making you happy? What is not making you happy? So to know that you even carry that, or like, or that you have carried that throughout your life, and that you had that experience as a young human, that makes my heart really happy, because a lot of people don't have, that experience, and it's completely the opposite, right? It's like it's the fear of doing that instead of having the happiness and the joy from that. Um, what comes to mind is, how were your parents about your exploration? Like when you decided to wear your grandmother's pajamas, like what were they saying? Because I feel like a lot of us, like we have the bigger circle, the school, and like our, maybe bigger families, but it's mainly like our small circle, our parents, our siblings, that are in many ways, creating a lot of the structures that we believe are the way to go about our lives.
Yeah, I love this question because I grew up in a really chaotic house, only because, and I hope that people know I'm saying this in like a really positive way, but like Filipino culture is just kind of chaotic. Like we talk over each other, the TV's on while the radio's on, like everything is happening at the same time. And it really gives you a sense of not being self-conscious because no one is scrutinizing you because there's too much happening. Like maybe you want that attention, but the plus side of not getting all that attention is you can kind of go off on your own and do your own thing. So my parents were not thrilled about anything I did that they thought could make me be labeled as strange. My mom to this day winces when you say anything she does is weird. She considers that like a total insult, like almost like a curse word. She, I think that my soul chose this mom for such a particular reason, because actually one of our temple, someone else in our temple brought this up to me in a reading I had with them. But I learned so much tolerance because my parents are so different than me and so different than each other. And so are my siblings. So I also got this benefit of like energetic diversity, even as a kid. My mother and father are very religious, and they are also pretty conservative, actually. And they really, more than anything, wanted me to be popular. My mother instilled a value in me that to be smart, or to go into politics, or to like seek the status of a good school, or to know people that know people was very important. And my father was loved to work for banks, and he worked in product development for a company called Sunrio and was traveling a lot as a small, even when he was young. But so my dad was kind of like this explorer and really interested in finding out new things, but deeply concerned with reputation. And my mom is somebody who really loves her family, her people, her comfort zone, loves to know how to do one thing, do it really well, and that's it. And so to this day, I think they're like really happy for me and deeply confounded by me. Like, I think they literally don't understand what I'm doing. And yet, both of my parents will ask me for tarot readings when I come home, every single time I come home, even though they're deeply Catholic. So it's like, you know, I feel like they were kind of like, well, we're not from here, so maybe we don't know how to tell her if what she's doing is right or wrong. So I don't know. We kind of got to trust that she's going to figure it out because she's not listening anyway.
That is so, so interesting. Well, I guess we can start diving deep into what it is that you do. If you want to share with us, what do you do?
So I do something that I named imagination healing. And I work under that umbrella name because I am so deeply passionate about bringing together and synthesizing all the ways of knowing, all the lenses available to us, from the scientific to the philosophical, the sort of esoteric or the spiritual. And I'm so passionate about people living into the question, like, who am I? And creating art from that question and learning from each other by constantly being in a relationship with that question. And I create as many containers as I can that allow people to feel safe enough to explore that question without any sort of assumption or any sort of limitation. And I think a lot of what I do, like botany, like I think of every person as a different plant that hasn't been discovered yet. And we're observing their creativity in real time together and saying, oh, this plant likes sunlight, or this plant likes this kind of soil. And I love being in like a mirror for people to have the permission to just rediscover and create who they are in real time.
Mhm. That is definitely how it feels, being on the other side of that, uh, being a participant of your containers. Yes, it feels even more than that. It is very deep. That's why I got emotional before. And just like as you speak, my heart is like vibrating because I can feel just like the transparency and the joy of your heart and how you show that through your work. Um, I am very emotional today, and it just makes me very emotional to talk to you. Um, so creativity obviously is a huge, huge part of what you do because basically we're talking about that. Like, what is the essence of the, it's kind of like the DNA of our creativity, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's what you're exploring in your containers. So tell me a little bit more about how you think or feel about creativity and how it's intertwined in everything that you do.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I want to also say that like it's really beautiful to hear you talk about your heart and emotions because I think that this ties into your question actually, which is that, I think that creativity is life. So let's say that we're right about the prevailing theory of the universe that the Big Bang created, that in an instant, everything we know about that's visible in the universe all is all stemming from a single moment in time where everything was suddenly created. If that's true, which is the theory that most people believe, that means that like everything set in motion is part of creation. Like creativity is just existence. And so to me, creativity is just plugging into that memory of the Big Bang that we all come from the same place. We're all just living into the choreography of the same source, the same origin point, the same source point, exploring different ways of being part of that like eternal fractal, of being the divine, of being the universe, of being the source. It's almost like the universe was like, I wonder what it would like to be this. And then at some point, a Natalia appeared, and at some point a Xenia appeared. And so when you get emotional about these things, I think it's because children know this. Like they don't need to be taught that. They just need to be supported in being who they are. And so when we get to go to spaces where being who we are is supported instead of somebody trying to like entrain us into a shape that they prefer or that they value or that society values, it's automatically going to be emotional and healing because it's reminding us of like who we are at a core level without all of these sort of strange programs running in our unconscious and our subconscious and our energy field. And so I actually feel like emotions are supposed to be part of that creative choreography, that like when they move through us, they make us want to make art or like connect to people or like connect to nature or just they put energy in our bodies. And I think that creativity can help us understand our emotions as natural and resources of energy and as creative engines in a way. If we would just not have so many strange stories about like what we're supposed to say or the stories that come with the feelings of like grief or sadness or even joy. So yeah, I feel like creativity to me is really just existing with the remembrance that you deserve to have life force flowing through you. You deserve to have other people witnessing what that looks like. And it is so human to want to see other people's life force flowing through them too. Other people's creativity is like, it's like food for our soul,
Yeah. Oh gosh. I that life force is really running through me right now. I I wrote down a couple or a few things that I love about the work that you do and the work that you share almost on a daily basis. I think you share on a daily basis on your Instagram. If you are listening right now and you do not follow Xenia, I highly recommend it, because at least for me, it is a source of just your creative energy just like really is soul for it's food for my soul, and that's how it feels every time I read every single thing that you share. And then this brings me to one of those things that I grabbed that said, I wonder how many people don't feel they have the right to need themselves. Can you expand a little bit on that? Because I found that very, very beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for tuning into what I shared there. I really appreciate it. And I feel like that, most of the things I share are messages I hear for myself because I'm going through something or I'm processing something. And then I have a question and then I hear myself answer the question. And on that day that I wrote that, I remember feeling really badly because somebody reached out to me and asked me a question. I forget what it was. And for 41 years of my life, most of the time anyone asks me for anything, unless I'm sick, in already doing something or incapacitated in some way, of course I say yes. It's like a huge joy for me to support people. Right now, I believe we're in a collective consciousness shift. And what I mean by that is I just think like the energy of the whole collective is changing. And as a result, most of the people who work in or around me are also changing. And I could feel that I actually can't do this right now. I actually can't answer every single person who asks me a question. I can't extend myself to resource other people because I'm sort of like in this chrysalis of my own where I am changing who I am on such a deep level that I need to pour this inside. And I come from a culture of constant giving. I'm born in a womb carrying body that other people will identify my role as in my gender as one who's meant to give as a default. And I was raised by people who are self-sacrificing, deeply self-sacrificing. So whenever I have felt like I need to say no to someone for my whole life, it feels there's so much of a charge there. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm tired, I'll get to that later. It's like, it feels very life or death for me to be able to say, I actually just need myself right now. And I think because I was raised by people who were also coming from a country that's, very poor, everybody needed each other so much that your interdependence or codependence or whatever you want to call it is how you survive. To think about what you have to give is too threatening to your system. The whole family might die if you tune into what your body needs right now. That is how so many of us have adopted our nervous systems that we've inherited come in this way. Like, how dare you feel tired? How dare you be irritated or sad or need time? What a luxury. What a privilege for you. And as a result, so many of us had mothers that never were mothered. And that's nobody's fault. It's really not. And so in that moment where I was like, you just need yourself. You are your own baby right now. You're looking at the baby's too tired. You need to mother the baby right now. This is very simple. Get out of all these stories. They're so old. They have nothing to do with you. Enough. And so I had that thought and said, yeah, I just need myself. I've never felt like I had permission to just let that be so simple. I need myself. So most of the people who resonate with my work feel deeply responsible to the community, their collective, or the people they love. It's just, those are the people that understand my work. And so a lot of them don't need help in wanting to contribute. That's natural. They need support and permission to know that it's okay to notice how you are. And if there's something you need, that's okay.
I'm wondering about your process to connect with yourself. Like, like in practical terms, is this something that you're having like an internal dialogue, or are you journaling, or how does that look for you to get to that level of understanding yourself, listening to yourself, answering yourself the questions that that you discovered you were asking or that were planted in your heart?
I've always talked to myself, it's always just been silently in my own head. I hear the question and then I hear the answer. And I've had so many different sort of psychic readings or Akashic readings where people say, you're connected to the galactic this, or like you're super connected to the galactic center. That's in my galactic astrology. And I do a lot of journaling and a lot of channeled writing, but really like where most of these things come from is when I'm doing dishes or I'm sitting outside or I'm taking a walk and I'm just really letting myself be. And when I'm doing dishes or taking a walk, my mind tends to relax because I'm like, oh, I'm doing something, There's not this like, what should I be doing? Anxiety. And while I'm doing something, I just hear it. I just hear my thought or rumination. And then it just sort of the answers just kind of drop in as if they're my own thoughts.
I asked that because, of course, to me, that is almost like from an outsider looking into your work. It's like I want to understand how you get to this level of clarity as far as like your thoughts and like the answers, right? Because at least speaking for myself, like I'm connected to my thoughts, I one of my ways is meditation and journaling as well. But sometimes I feel like this is, of course, maybe the journey of healing and really loving ourselves and accepting ourselves. But even in my own mind, I would question things, or things are maybe not even good enough to come to the paper, or like it's almost like they don't even have the permission yet to exist or to actually bloom, right? So the thoughts are there, but there is something that is blocking them from actually coming through fully. That is my experience. Not all the time. There's different aspects of my life where I can feel that those things flow easily, and then there are some others that I know it's there, but it's like, how can I fully get it out of here, of my consciousness, of my awareness? So that makes me curious. That made me curious, which is why I ask. And it makes me think about just in general having that ability to connect to our emotions, like what we were speaking to, and just basically being a sensitive person. And there was something that you shared, I believe that was this week, and you said something along the lines that there is a difference between being a sensitive being, sensitive human, and taking things personally. Um, would you like to share with us what that means?
So I was thinking a lot about how there's a lot of people in my life in various ways, including myself at times, who like to create stories to protect themselves. So an example is like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious after I met up with a friend. Maybe it's because my friend is mad at me. Maybe it's because I said the wrong thing. Maybe it's because, maybe I said the wrong thing to the barista, like all the things that we always are thinking all the time. And I was thinking about how sometimes when you're in a room and you're deeply sensitive, you're just tuning into literally the whole field of every person's feelings and every person's emotions and every person's sort of energetic movement, and how making the story personal to you, creating a narrative where it's because you're to blame for something, you're at fault for something, you caused something, without knowing any information from the people around you, without having any kind of dialogue with anyone or reality check, can be very, very dangerous, because there's this beautiful time and culture that we're in where people are really proud of being sensitive, where people were not proud of being sensitive at all before. And sensitive for most of us was used as an insult. It definitely was in my family. And you're too sensitive really meant like you're taking things too personally. It actually meant like you're fragile. And what it really means is, like, if you picture like certain insects, like certain butterflies can like see more colors, and certain animals can feel more vibrations, or see or like hear more sounds. That's all sensitivity is. It's more sensation. That's it. Who interprets the sensation? Well, like the books we read, or what people tell us, or like you said before, our nuclear family. That's who tells you what the sensation means. And because we're so taught to numb, and we're so taught to like need an answer right away, this time that's so beautiful, where we're also proud of being sensitive, has become this shield of like, well, I can't be in that place or around those people because like I'm too sensitive. And I find that to sort of fall in the category of like, I take the sensory experience to be personally about me, or I'm personalizing it in some way. And so I realize ultimately what I care about is freedom, and sensitivity becoming a path towards self-knowledge becoming a path towards interconnectedness and freedom. And when we take things personally, we basically like imprison ourselves. And it's also really hard to walk around the world feeling like everything that happens is because of you or has to do with you. And I know that because I did that for a long time and was raised by people that do that. So it's like very human, not shaming it at all. That would be the last ingredient I'd want to throw into the pot. But it's just a helpful distinction.
Mm. When I hear you speak about all of the beautiful things that you speak about, I think of, and I've mentioned him a couple times in my podcasts. I don't know if they have come out yet, but Dr. Daniel Siegel. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but I think you would really, really like it. He is a doctor. He has obviously his scientific background, and he speaks from that lens. Yet when he speaks, I find that I feel like I'm listening to a spiritual teacher. And all of his work is on, integration and interconnectedness in like the way that we relate to each other. And this is coming to me right now because as you're speaking is pretty much one whole module that I have I have taken from his one of his classes, in which he talks about, well, first of all, the way that he describes emotions is a shift of energy and information flow, right? So it's like, so the shift of the connection or the way that I am perceiving the symbol that is this computer or the symbol that is the honk of a car. And when that creates, this sensation is basically a shift of that energy that my brain is obviously created and programmed to make sense of. So and he's a psychiatrist. So when he teaches this, and he's teaching to people that are either doing a similar job or working, with their energy. One of the big and most important things before we even start to talk to people and work with people is understanding our own capability and perception of this shift in energy, so that we understand when is this information that is kind of like coming from my own energy field. This is not exactly the words that he uses. And when is something that is coming outside of, my boundaries of that energy, because of the propensity of human beings, especially those that are more, sensitive or empaths, to feel the pain of others, to feel that energy of others, to feel whatever is happening to the other person. So in that module, he talked about, mirror neurons and how that is actually working, and how that is part of this whole function of the brain in which we're actually perceiving the shift of energy in others, and so on. So I am going on that tangent because I think that you would really, really love his work. Just because, I think that you love all of those areas, the scientific one. And to me, when I understood what was happening at the physiological level, I was in awe. First of all, it brings awareness to that because I am a sensitive person. And one of the ways in which I usually perceive that is because someone is crying, I immediately cry. So it has taken a long time for me to recognize when is it that I am, adopting or really taking on someone else's pain or sensations, and when is it actually mine. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. And it takes a lot of courage to even begin to question that, because a lot of times we are not even familiar with our own sensations and pain. Even though we know we are sensitive, I was telling my friends this week, there's a huge difference between knowing the name of our fears and our emotions and actually knowing them deeply, because it is like a relationship. It's not the same that I know your name is Xenia. When I actually know you is when I spend time with you, when I get to sit with you and like witness you and hear you and connect with you. And in the same way, that's emotions and sensations, right? We can
Yeah.
know the name, but we have to be with that to actually understand it. And before we can even understand other sensations and get to draw that line and that boundary, we have to understand ours. Um, so yeah, so I think that was beautiful. That's why I loved when you share that, because I've done the same thing, right? I've taken things too personal without really knowing that I am creating even more baggage for myself to work with and to understand and all of that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I realized there's this thread in everything we're talking about, which is, uh, you know, you're describing this experience of being inside and outside at the same time, which gives you a whole picture, right? So when you're inside the feeling, you're not naming the physiological sensations, you're not naming the science, you're not looking at the metaphysics or the philosophy, you're just in your body walking with the energy that's moving. You're just flowing with that river and seeing where it goes. You're not judging it. You're not labeling it. You're just sitting with it. You're not sitting in it and identifying it. You're watching it and holding it while it moves, because it always moves, emotion. But then the science gives you that step back to go, oh, from outside, what was that? And I feel like it's really interesting. This morning I heard on YouTube, Daryl Anka, who channels this being named Bashar, talk about what is the higher self? Like, what even is that? And Bashar says, like, your higher self is just you, but it's like higher up. Just like if it was higher up on top of a building, it could say, like, I see that over there. I see that over there. And then the you that's on the ground is like, oh, thank you. Down here, it looks different. It feels different. And so I feel like what you're describing and what both of us are talking about is you have to be on the ground. Otherwise, you're not really fully living into the human experience, which is the part of us that's like, I feel everything. I don't understand what's happening, but I feel it. And then you have to allow yourself to kind of go up into some other vantage point where you can depersonalize it and you can start to understand what's happening with a little bit of distance. And then somewhere in allowing yourself to be both of those things somehow at the same time is like freedom or creativity or connection or change. But I think it's this, what creates pain, I think, in so many ways is like this weird culture we have of like feeling like you have to decide and sort of lock in which perspective is more true or more right or more human or more spiritual. And it's like, if you were supposed to be living just from your spirit's perspective, like you wouldn't be here, you know, you just wouldn't be here. So yeah, I think that's really cool how that doctor and scholar is giving a lens to like really respect and see your emotions, but also be in them and have them.
I love that so many times when we are talking, not only in this conversation, but in the past, I see the thread of like the messages that I've been listening to and that I've been talking about. I've literally had this week a couple conversations, and I even posted a video on YouTube about the intersection of spirituality, and I called it psychological, personal growth in this YouTube video that I posted. But it's what I'm talking about is really that the integration of our human and our spirit, understanding that our human is an expression of that spirit. And I personally have had moments in my life where I have this longing to be just there, up there. By the way, I love Bashar. So just like from Bashar's perspective, like there's a longing for that. And then this whole month, especially, I mean, obviously, I have moments in which I'm like, no, but I love this life and I love flowers and I love nature. And like nature, I have a line sometimes when I eat something really good and that happens in nature as well. And I'm like, this is worth reincarnating for. Like a really good, like Thai food or something like that, which I love. I'm always like, this is worth reincarnating for. But in general, I do have like that, oh, like everything up there is better.
Mm.
And for the last month and so, I've had this real realization of like the highest expression of my spirituality is my human. It's like if I am living my human life in a way that I am proud of, that is my spirit, dancing, that there is a reason why we're here in this human body. And like you said at the beginning with the beautiful explanation that you gave, like if what created it all is part of like who we are, then this human is part of that creation and that cosmic intelligence. So my my way of honoring that is really being incarnated in this and honoring it and experiencing it and feeling it, which is really hard, of course, because those emotions are so real. Everything is so real. So it's not an easy journey that we have. But I think the more we have this type of conversations, the more that we have people like you that are allowing the space to explore that, because that is ultimately what I feel like the pain that we all have carried with us is the limitation to be free. Because it's in that freedom, then we wouldn't have, a lot of bumpers to kind of like, struggle with.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting because I think about how, you know, I'm a pretty optimistic person by nature. I'm a pretty like philosophical person by nature. My South Node is in Sagittarius. And I feel like when I was a lot younger, I would get depressed really easily after the age of like 10 or something, because when you're, I don't know, I kind of conceptualize that my soul is from a place where magic is like very, very normal. And you have something in your imagination, it just kind of happens. And I remember one time my friend Hank, who is a psychic, said to me, like, I think you feel like you hit roadblocks all the time because everything's so slow here. And I just started like streaming so many tears, and I wasn't even having any thoughts. I just was like, yeah, I'm tired. Like, why is everything so hard here? And I'd fell into different forms of depression at so many different times in my life. And now I rarely feel that. Of course, I have days that are like sad or difficult, or moments that are sad. But this depression was this feeling like everything is going to be hard forever. Everything feels like walking up a really steep hill, carrying a bag of rocks, like the myth of Sisyphus or something. And then, it just occurs to me that so many of the people who identify with the kind of work we're talking about, with these kind of spiritual concepts, might feel like this human incarnation is foreign to them, like it's like being like in an underwater environment when you are not used to being underwater. And when you have this spiritual, creative, intellectual sort of curiosity to just experiment with the idea, like, maybe my soul's not from here. Maybe it is harder for me. And maybe instead of going, well, everything's too hard for me, so I'm not going to do that, you can go, okay, logically, somehow I'm here by some force of nature or the universe. So that must mean that, like, I'm supposed to be having a good time or exploring this. And maybe if things don't work for me the way they work for everyone else, I should explore how they work for me. And I feel like understanding, it's like this delicate dance of affirming that things are hard here for certain kinds of people, accepting that and going, well, we already bought tickets to the amusement park, so what ride do you want to go on? Because we're here today, like, let's just do this. So yeah, anyway, I think it's just so important as a person who has an optimistic tendency to honor those kind of like heavy feelings that are so present here at this time.
Yeah. I think that is why my soul has taken me in this direction, especially with mindfulness meditation. I feel like with that practice, I've been able to learn to hold myself in that pain, longing, whatever it is. And the beauty of it is that because I've been able to sit with it, it has naturally kind of like transformed into this admiration for it, right? So instead of running away from it or just seeing it as, it is what it is, like this human experience is painful, it's like whatever, hard, depressive, and all of the things that I have experienced myself, as I have sat with it and I have understood where and what that is here to do, now it has transformed into this admiration and this appreciation for it, which I called, love and compassion. The compassion compassion I have defined as just the beginning of compassion is the ability to hold the space, is like the active act of holding myself through that experience of whatever it is, sadness, grief, anger. So how do you think about compassion? How do you weave that in your work?
Well, as you were talking, I realized the word compass is in compassion, which is really interesting, right? Direction. Your compass gives you direction. And I had this thought this morning. And I feel like it was because I was coming here, because I was so kind of entertained by this thought. But I thought about like how many different vibrations there are on this planet to experience and frequencies. And I thought about, like, what if you're from some part of the galaxy where there's never been a certain kind of sadness or a certain kind of grief or even a certain kind of, I don't know, maybe you've never experienced boredom where you're from or agitation. And maybe from that spiritual place, you thought to yourself, oh, I can feel that. I can experience that. Like, I'll transmute that. I can totally do that. Like, I'm such a big energy. I'm such a bright light. And so you agree to incarnate onto Earth and see if you can transmute that poison by living as a human being. You see if you can come down here and transmute that frequency to change it and ingest it so it becomes the medicine or the antidote through your digestion of it. And I think that compassion has so much to do with the humility to know that we cannot know enough in our minds about anyone around us or even our own selves to judge the experience that of all the billions and trillions of things you could be, you know, or times you could be in that put you here. And instead having the humility to go, some force so much bigger than me trusted me to exist in this form. The least I could do is be curious about my own feelings without judging them and extend that curiosity to other people without judging them, and to live in that space as much as I can, even though I have taken the poison, even though I know how to make the medicine. Sometimes just existing is so much. And can I appreciate that? You know, when I see other people and I see myself, can I just appreciate how much has to happen for us to even exist? And then when you see this sort of like sacred miracle inside everything, it's so easy to extend generosity because how could you judge any person? Yeah, it just becomes sort of illogical to harm ourselves and other people in that way when you're coming from that place.
This reminds me of something that we've quickly kind of like talked about, which is using creativity as kind of like this conduit to empathy and compassion. Would you like to share a little bit of your thoughts there?
I feel like when we are angry, or not angry, no. When we are feeling really charged up about something and we're really identified that as like, this is who I am, we tend to have a really like one track mind, or sort of like one note vibration. It's not like a symphony. It's just like, this is the only thing I can feel and nothing else is true but this thing. But somehow, say you are feeling that way and you journal, which is very creative, right? You're just letting something flow, or you paint, or you even take a walk in nature, which is also kind of creative. Something starts to, I mean, you described this earlier, it starts to move or melt and tell you more about the thing that's actually happening, or the feeling you're really feeling. When you follow that curiosity, which creativity and curiosity, you know, they're like twins, they travel together. It transforms the experience so much that like this thing that seemed like one pixel or one color or one dot becomes this like rainbow or this hologram. And it gives you sort of 100 different ways to look at yourself or the situation that you're in. And so the same becomes true for other people. So for me, writing is my main creative thing. And oftentimes I really feel like, oh, I didn't know that I knew that. Like outright, you know, and I'm discovering as I'm going like, oh, that's a way to look at it. And because it takes this very constricted place and gives me all this space to breathe. And from there, it's much easier to be empathetic towards myself or other people. And also, it takes trapped energy and it like helps us like dance with it or alchemize it or move it. And then we kind of like heal ourselves in the process of letting the creation out. We hit our roadblocks and we stay with ourselves, you know, or we
Yeah.
have like elation or flow and we get to experience that. And then I think when we're feeling that healing, we want to share it with other people.
There are so many things that I could talk to you about. I mean, somehow we've been talking for an hour, and I just love that you're like, this morning I woke up and I was thinking about so many different expressions of vibration. And like that is kind of like what I think about. And I'm like, I love being able to talk to someone that has this type of thoughts and that you're actually, bringing them to the world, which is why I admire your work and what you do so much. Going back to what I was saying before, I think one of like my journey in a way is really sitting with that and the allowing myself to express those things that because of, what we've been talking about, the programming, the conditioning, the layers that I have to work through, are kind of like still constricting, that freedom to just express those things. Before we start to wrap it up, I do have another thing that I would love to bring that I saw, which I think we've been speaking to it, but if there's anything else that you want to expand on it. So it says, this was you writing. I can't remember if this was a post or maybe one of your newsletters. Um, I'm devoted to accepting mystery, not because I prefer it, but because existence requires that I do. And I think you kind of like spoke about it a little bit before, when you said, like this is the logical kind of like thing. Um, so yeah, I want to let you kind of like share a little bit more about that because I find it so beautiful.
Well, thank you for this question. I am actually very much a systems thinker. I love to understand things. I'm an Aquarius rising. I love astrology, human design, all the things. But what I realize is that everything is consciousness. So we are consciousness. So everything that exists is, I think, like the divine mind trying to express itself somehow. And so if I want to do something that no one else has ever done or that I've never done, there's no way I can know exactly how to do it or how it will go. There's just, if I want to be on the path of expanding consciousness, of consciousness growing, of humanity learning, or of the universe learning, I have to push myself off the map of what already has happened into the part where everything is muddy and everything is gray. And that's potential. That's the place of like darkness or potential or the soil or the new moon. And we're educated in a system that is all about being rewarded for understanding the past. Like, here's the system that we know of. Here's the way we've done it before. And I also had this thought this morning, and I really feel like this was for this conversation, that so many people are talking about belonging, and so many people are talking about having a wound of not doing things right or self-doubt, because I think there are so many people incarnated at this time who came here to be different. And so that's why there's this like push and pull of like, I want to be different. I want to express, no, I want to belong, just like everyone in my family wanted to belong. And I think we all share that wound of feeling like we're too different or we don't belong, which is like actually what makes us belong to each other, that we all know how that feels. And I feel like this moment that we're in of sort of birthing the next plane of consciousness or the next iteration of, it's super corny, but I feel like what we're trying to do together, so many of the people in my community, is to just like make it safer to emanate the vibration of love, which I think is something that people have really laughed at and made fun of and Hallmark carded and sort of made the collective very suspicious of. And it's sort of like embarrassing to be that emanation in the culture that we exist in. And I feel like what you're doing and what so many creative people are doing, or so many people trying to be centered in the heart are doing, because the heart is a mystery. Like, what even does that mean? Are trying to like understand the only way to be ourselves is to push ourselves in the direction where we don't know what will happen, because we came here to be different. We did. And I believe that we wouldn't have found each other if we didn't share that desire to try to define what it means to be courageous, which the root word of courage is heart. So yeah, I kind of spun off on a tangent there, but that's.
I think that was you reading my mind, because that was going to be the next question, pretty much. Like, how does the heart play a role in all of this? And you just beautifully shared with us. I feel like, yes, 100%. I feel like one of the reasons why I get emotional with, being just like with you in general is because, and like I said before, like what my inner child wanted, what my inner child needed, which is kind of like the closest thing, that pureness of the heart, right? Like that essence of purity that needed that acknowledgement, that needed to be expressed. I feel like that is what I feel when I am talking to you. Like that's why I admire your work. That's why I want to know more about it, because I feel that safety of expressing that. And a huge part of my own journey is really feeling safe sharing that. Like for the longest time, I felt so self-conscious about coming out with a podcast that the name was The Way of the Heart. Like, who am I to do that? What does that even mean? And like all of those things were a reason for me to, even shrink more and more. And it's because people like you and people in the community that are really sharing your heart and your work and really making love the the carrier and like the new way, that I have felt that I can do it, and that it's safe to do it. But it is definitely one of the biggest things, at least, for me in my experience, to feel like it's okay. And I feel like one of the biggest things about that blockage and feeling that limitation is because we are so used to having a very straight line from A to B, and like things have a specific outcome. And like you said, the mystery of the heart is that it is this fertile soil. It is that is the potentiality of the cosmic intelligence. It's like we don't know what's going to happen, but there's beauty in that. And I'm just starting to kind of like feeling okay with embracing it fully, because it's always been here. I've always felt it. I've always known it in a way, like, when I was very little, like my childhood was like I was angry, I was a rebel, I was, all of those things. But I feel like because I had such a big feeling about love, that I was so angry with everything, right? And I think this is kind of like circling the whole conversation. For me, it was really coming to a realization of like, okay, what is my part in this way that I am approaching the world? Why am I angry? Why do I feel so disconnected from everything? And slowly, I'm still going through it, is understanding that I believe that love is the way, and the way of the heart, it really is the way. And and I know it's going against everything that we have learned. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for, just doing your work, for being courageous, for doing and sharing your heart, your thoughts, your ideas, your perspective. I really love everything that you do, and I am so, so happy and honored to have you in the podcast and for people to get to connect with you and to hear everything that you share, because I think it is true, true medicine.
Oh, thank you, Natalia. I also want to thank you for being such a insightful voice and presence in all the container that in Imaginal Temple, and throughout the time I've known you, I had the luxury of meeting you in person, and I just want to say this, that like when I shared things for most of my life, I was pretty surprised when people said that they made sense to them or resonated with them at all. And I would identify mostly as like a pretty shy or introverted person in a lot of ways. But like you, there's this like huge field of passion that wants to be shared. And I just want to thank you for opening up your voice and your heart for all of us. I've already learned so much from you. And I feel like it is really, really courageous work to do what you love, So thank you for creating this space for us and for inviting me and for having me here.
Yeah. Before we ended, because you are offering some beautiful containers, do you want to share maybe a little bit of any of the offerings that you're going to be having?
Yeah, so this fall, I don't have the exact date yet, but I'm bringing back a course called Create Your Cosmology. And that's a course where we take your unconscious, your subconscious, and your conscious mind, and we till the soil and we break up any thought patterns or beliefs that aren't yours so you can construct your own authentic perspective and worldview. So that's going to be in the fall. And then I'm going to be bringing back Imaginal Temple, which is the container you spoke about, which is a creative mentorship space. And that will come back next year. And I'm planning on some experimental iterations, but that will definitely be back. And I also have a Substack called Garden of the Imaginal, where I send a weekly attunement of writing or recording once a week. And I also offer either a mini reading event or a chance to get a one-on-one session with me for all of the paid subscribers.
Amazing. I have to join the Substack. I didn't even know that you had all of those options. I I consume all of the stuff on Instagram and the newsletters, which I love. It's like, there are very few emails that I get that I'm like, ooh, want to open it right away. Your email is one of those. So, Xenia, thank you so, 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 so much. My heart is full. And I cannot wait to join your next container, because I want to keep learning from you, and just being around your presence really is uplifting for me. Sorry if I have been just throwing at you things like this the whole time, but I just like it's how I feel. I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable, but I'm sorry. This is exactly how I feel, and I have to say it.
Well, thank you. I'm learning to receive, and I think it's like, of course, so perfect as you are coming from the heart and showing that so much. And I just feel such a deep emanation of love from you whenever we connect. So I really thank you for inviting me here. It's been such an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you, Xenia. And for everyone listening or watching, thank you so much for your time, for your energy. Please, I really encourage you to connect with Xenia in some way, because I promise you, everything that she's doing is really medicine and it's food for the soul. And if you found anything interesting in this episode, if you think anyone will enjoy it, please share with others. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.